right, I'm Andy Singleton. This is Hanging Einstein. Welcome back. I am pleased to be joined by a friend in real life, as well as through Twitter and technology, and that is Mr. Ian Wharton. You can find him on Twitter at NFL Film Study. Ian, how are you today?
I'm pretty good, bud. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be a part of this this series that you've got. I know you do a lot of great work with a lot of great guests, so honored to be a part of it.
Well, I appreciate you saying those kind of words. I know we've talked about getting you on in the past, and just you are a very busy man. So then this is actually we're kind of like in your prime season, if you will. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody your credentials and what it is you do and where they can find you for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah, so right now you can find most of my work over at Bleacher Report, draft analyst for them. I also do NFL work as well. I'm covering both NFL and NFL draft. Honored really to be a part of it. They came to me with an expanded role about Christmas time for the next 6 months to be doing double duty, which is just crazy to me. I mean, that's a really good site. They get a lot of attention through their connections as well as CNN and Turner Broadcasting. So really proud to be a part of that. Before Bleacher Report, I was working with a couple of random just kind of startup sites. Draft Mecca was the one big one. Draft Twitter is pretty familiar with Draft Mecca. It didn't really turn out too well, but it ended up being a really good project for me because connections-wise, it had a very good reputation among other outlets. People recognized a lot of the writers that were working there. So it was a really good platform for me to kind of get started. Then Bleacher Report gave me a chance, and from there I was able to parlay that into Optimum Scouting with Eric Gelko and a lot of other really good writers and draft talent evaluators. Worked with former GM Ted Sundquist on some projects through Optimum Scouting and also some CFL and also some arena football scouting reports as well. So just trying to get my feet wet everywhere possible. Just really, really fortunate to get the opportunities that I've had and really right now with Bleacher Report. Started up my own website, draftcentric.weebly.com. Kind of put that on the back burner for now since Bleacher Report came with me to with the extended offer. So I'm writing 6 articles a week right now, and so it's things are pretty crazy. And I also have a full-time job during the day, so we stay pretty busy in my apartment between my girlfriend and I. She doesn't really get too much time with me, but yeah.
Well, I'm cutting into that right now. So
no, that's okay. So,
well, thank her from me and the audience for giving us you for this period of time. But I was going to ask you that. So this is not a full-time job, although you spend full-time amount of energy and effort putting into it. You still have a full-time job that you're committed to, in addition to all the writing you're doing at this time.
Yeah, it's a really tough industry. For people looking to get into it, it's a great industry. Obviously, I do what I love. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. I don't have to do it. It's simply out of enjoyment. I mean, I am compensated for it, but it's obviously not enough to do it full time, which that's not a negative. Like I said, I mean, I'm just happy to be doing it, let alone to have the platform that I have. But absolutely, if you're looking to get into this industry, my advice really would be just do what you love. And if you get the opportunities, if you present unique enough content, thorough enough analysis, maybe some people will like it and you'll get lucky, like I did. I don't really think it's a talent thing. Honestly, I think there's more talented people that aren't writing on the platform that I have. So sometimes you just got to get lucky.
Right. Well, a credit to you is when I actually got a chance to meet you at the 2015 Senior Bowl, and we're hanging out doing the Saucy Q thing, doing the Veach thing, everything like that, and we were in company of a lot of well-respected and draft analysts, amateur, professional alike, and you are the resounding one that everybody looked to and said, if anybody's going to make it as a scout, real scout, you probably had the best shot, and the odds-on favorite were you. So that's a credit to your peers as well. So I everything you put out, I've read is it's top notch, and I don't just say that because we're friends, and I say that because it's the truth. Like you put in some detailed, very well researched, thought out articles. So it's no surprise that you are having the success you're having with this. But before we get back into some of the things that you look for in your analysis of drafting and all that kind of stuff, you're in Virginia now, but that's a new home for you, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I moved here from Houston probably back in August. Yeah, it was like August time frame.
And that was for the real job, the one that pays the bills job?
Yeah, yeah. It was a tough move, also for family reasons. I'm actually from well, originally from Western New York, but more recently from Ohio. And so myself and my girlfriend have a lot of family in the Ohio area. So for us, Virginia, I've got my mom in Virginia, and then as well as my sister. She just moved here, and she just had a baby with her husband. So for us, it was kind of relocating for sake of relocation for jobs, but also for family reasons as well. It's kind of nice that we're closer to home now. Or just a drive away as opposed to like a 20-hour drive. But I will admit, we miss Houston. We loved Houston.
Houston's like thriving right now.
Oh man, it's the place to be, and I still couldn't get a job there. So, didn't pick a money industry, but that's okay. Like I said, I like what I do a lot, even in my day job. So,
are you at liberty to say what that day job is?
Yeah, so I'm a recruiter for the Department of Justice. So right now we're working on recruiting for court interpreters. So I like it a lot because I'm helping people. I'm finding people, getting them jobs, and it's a definitely an industry where it's booming as well. So it's weird. Like I didn't think so my undergrad's in sport management and my master's is in educational psychology. I never thought that I'd be in recruiting. But I mean, honestly, it's a really cool field. The money's fantastic. It's a grind, but I mean, if you're a draft analyst, then you're a grinder. So I mean, it's one of those personality traits. So I'm really blessed to have that job. And I mean, I go to work every day, and I've had that job now for 6 or 7 months, and so I really enjoy it though.
Well, my concern for you is, when do you sleep? Because you have a full-time job recruiting. You write a tremendous amount of words every week, and in order to write those words, you watch a tremendous amount of film, right? So
yeah,
how do you manage the time? Is there like a time portal you're going into where you're stealing a few extra hours a day?
Boy, I wish. A lot of it's trying to get ahead. It's really hard to write for the next day, but unfortunately, it happens sometimes, especially with some of the bigger film pieces that I work on, especially with like cornerbacks. So if people are familiar with my work, I do coverage productivity. It's a series where I'll chart cornerbacks every route that they try to defend, whether they win, whether they lose. It's very time consuming. I've cut it down from a 16-game sample to an 8-game sample this year just to try to get through it a little bit. I only got through 36 cornerbacks last year, and although it was a great project, I simply can't do more writing this much and working this much. So I try to stay ahead, especially on the weekends. I can sometimes do, depending on the subject, two articles in a day, which if I can do that, then it makes the week much easier. But really, it's just trying to optimize time, and that's something that, I worked full-time through my undergrad. I worked full-time through my master's. So for me, it's just I've always kind of been doing that grind, and I've always kind of maximized my time whenever possible. We don't really, sometimes like we'll take a day off a week, like on like a Sunday or something. But in general, it's just, I work quite often, and I mean, I like it. Like I said, I can't complain about it because I signed up for it. So,
while you're just saying that, I'm just thinking it feels like every one of my guests has not only went to undergrad, but also has a master's degree as well. So I want to ask you to that end, where did you go for both?
Yeah, so my undergrad was at Ashland University. It's a Division II school, middle of nowhere in Amish country, Ohio. It was about 15 minutes away from where I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio. I liked staying local for my undergrad. It was big for me. My girlfriend also went there, but it was unrelated. We both ended up falling in love with the campus. Okay. But we really liked it there. But by the end, though, we were ready to just kind of get out and do something else. We were tired of like the small city, everything that comes with that. A lot of our family was from there. We were just kind of tired of that. So I got a grad assistant offer from the University of Houston for a marketing position. And so we went down to Houston for a couple years at University of Houston. So unfortunately, we left before Tom Herman got there. I'm a huge Tom Herman fan. It's a great place. I mean, U of H was awesome. the people I worked with there, just like from like the students to just even the faculty and staff, it's a different type of life down there, and I'm really glad that we made that move. Like I said, I wish we could have made it work down there, but unfortunately, just family reasons and stuff. So, we came back up here, but Virginia's cool too, just for different reasons. But right. Yeah, so I've been really lucky with the two places I've gone to school. I really can't say much more positive about them than what I have to say.
Well, Tom Herman, as you mentioned, has lit the city on fire, and they're turning out pros now. It's a top 20 program. It's the future is looking pretty bright down there, and that's just the Cougars. That's not even the rest of the city. They're hosting the NBA All-Star Weekend next year. There's a lot going on there. The Astros are World Series contenders at this point. Have probably the most talked about up and coming youngster in baseball in Carlos Correa, whose autograph is on this ball right here. So I'm a fan of Houston myself, but it's hard to be a fan of anybody outside of New York when you grew up. You're born and raised here for 41 years now. So, but now you said you stayed local at Ashland, which is D2. So did you actually play football in high school or at Ashland?
I played for my first 2 years in high school. Really got worn down by the process. So I played baseball, I played football, I played golf, all three sports. We had very demanding coaches, just to the point where it was very difficult for me to cope with, going year round at that level. I was a much better baseball player than a football player. I played tight end in high school, and I enjoyed it. I mean, we were a terrible football team, and so that didn't help. We were a terrible baseball team. Okay. But I was a much better baseball player. I played varsity 3 out of 4 years. Ended up doing really well, like statistically. Didn't play anything in college, just didn't have the athletic ability, and then also didn't really have the financial freedom to do that. I had to work full time throughout summer and even through the school year. So I was focused on different things, but overall, I mean, I was exposed to things, especially in college. I worked as closely to the athletic program as I could through internships. I worked with head coach Lee Owens there, even for as much time as I could, just studying film, trying to learn things from him and the coaching staff. And then sometimes that's just what you have to do, just to try to learn. That's what I did to learn, especially, and I did the same thing at U of H. Sat in on a couple coaches' meetings, even just talked to their defensive backs coach, which is partially why I like cornerbacks so much. I don't know why, but that's always been like a position of heart to me. And so
yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what everybody seems to have their niche, like whether it's receivers, running backs, whatever. And yours is in fact cornerbacks, not even defensive backs or safeties, but specifically cornerbacks. So how did you get to that?
Yeah, I just saw like an opening in the analysis, and I just saw nobody really effectively covering cornerbacks. I mean, how do we quantify how well a cornerback plays? Well, I mean, in all respects to Pro Football Focus, I don't think they do a good job because they're a little bit more results oriented. But there's so much more that happens outside of that result of the play. And so, I looked at it and said, well, is this guy even a good coverage cornerback? What do we do to judge that? And we use tackles, interceptions, forced fumbles, touchdowns allowed. I mean, There's just a lot of gray area in there. And so for me, it was just a matter of, for whatever reason, I've endeared myself to cornerbacks just growing up. I've just always enjoyed like Champ Bailey, Sam Madison, Patrick Surtain. A lot of these guys were just my favorite players to watch. Part of it was the Madden culture growing up too. Like while some guys liked running back, quarterback, whatever, I just, for whatever reason, just took to that position. And so I've kind of aligned my career with that a little bit more often than not. And,
nice.
And yeah, I've tried to just learn from wherever I could what really should happen at that position. And I also try to add my own takes into there as well.
Nice. And it's almost like golf in a weird way, that like the lowest statistics are what you're aiming for as a cornerback. Like you don't want a lot of tackles. You don't want a lot of balls thrown your way, to basically say what you're saying. If you're a true shutdown corner, then they're not even looking on your half of the field. So it is a tough thing to try to quantify and narrow down. But I was going to say, I asked you basically before, like, how do you find the time in the day? But you just opened my eyes to where you got this work ethic from. I mean, being an 18, 19-year-old and working full time while going to school and trying to be a kid and enjoy the college life and atmosphere. I mean, that just shows right there. Like, it's second nature to you now to just put all this time in and be a hard worker, and it's your lifestyle. But you also mentioned you were working with some of the teams and getting to break down some film. And is that kind of what was the calling for you to get into kind of this football scouting, or was that something you enjoyed even beyond that and before that?
Yeah, so what really got me into scouting and such was, I don't know, just growing up and watching the NFL draft. Obviously, every Saturday and Sunday, I'd be, on the couch watching football as a kid. I've just always been, I'm pretty competitive. I'm not like super competitive, but I'm a pretty competitive for a person. And I've always just taken to football. It's just been something that, obviously like most fans, you watch it with your parents growing up and you just kind of, get that affinity for it. As I played the game, I was a little bit more of like the warrior that was looking at the playbook, and I could draw up plays and such like that. Less so of like the athlete. I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'1", but I'm not overly athletic or fast. So it's just not my thing. So, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's just trait based, and even just like life or like football. If you've got the work ethic to try to achieve things, and I saw that at an early age. When I entered college, I originally wanted to be a sports agent or a scout. Like that was my thing. And I met my advisor in like the first day of classes, and he asked, "Well, what do you want to be?" And I said, "Well, I want to be a sports agent." And he was like, "Oh, then you're gonna have to go to law school, and you may have to look at other schools, than this school." Even like my first day after registering. And I was like, and we kind of talked about it for like 5 minutes, and I was like, yeah, I really don't want to go to law school. I don't want to do that anymore. But so really, I mean, my earliest draft memory and what really I think endeared me to it was watching. It was really strange. It was this bowl game. It was like an all-star game actually, and Marcus Colston was playing in this small. I can't even remember the name of the all-star game, but it was like the fourth quarter, and Marcus Colston had made this awesome over-the-shoulder catch for a touchdown. Before the end of the game, and I was just like, man, that guy has got to be good. Like, who is this guy? Went to Hofstra, ended up picked in like the 7th round. Yeah, like no one's ever heard this guy, and then he ends up blowing up as like a rookie and sophomore, and like instantly, I was like 14 years old at the time, and I was just like, this is what I want to do. Like, just projecting talent. Like, this is awesome. If I can be this, then that's what I want to be. And I don't know. I always enjoyed the draft. Like I said, I would just lay on the couch for like those 3 days when it was a 3-day format, and I'd literally write down every pick, hand and pen and paper. And something I still do actually, just now it's just for more like the tradition's sake. I've actually had to work the last couple of drafts, so it's made it a little bit harder, but I don't know, man. It's just something about it. I mean, sometimes you just find that thing in life, I guess, and you just fall in love with it.
Yeah. Well, the majority of my guests to this point have been fantasy analysts or something to do with the fantasy game. So we talk usually about DFS, daily fantasy sports, and how that's just like exploded in the last 2 years, if you will. And I bring that up because you being of the draft world and draft Twitter and all this stuff, you have to have witnessed the explosion of interest in the draft over the last couple of years. I mean, the draft was always a big thing. People are always into it and interested in it. But it just seems like now there's just so much more coverage on it. There's so many more eyes on it. There's so much more attention to detail with it. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's talking about stuff for months in advance. Do you think that's detracted from, somebody like your efforts? Do you think it's enhanced it? Would you speak to anything towards what you've seen from the increase in activity with people, responding to the draft?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been an incredible boom. Social media is really attributed to that, as well as daily fantasy, and as well as just general even NFL coverage on the TV. I mean, the NFL has exploded in such a way where it's a year-round thing. I mean, you've got like a month of downtime over summer, and that's it. Otherwise, they've mastered the calendar. They've really turned it into a perpetual money-making machine. And the draft is one thing that they've found it wasn't exploited until a few years ago. I've certainly benefited from that. Myself, but also I think in general, the average fan, the exposure that draft breakdown has brought, that YouTube has been able to bring. There's now so many games on so many networks every Saturday, whether you're streaming online, whether you're watching on TV or at the bar. Just your general NFL fan or football fan, I think is just smarter. I mean, myself included. I mean, the resources that we have now as opposed to even 5 years ago. I mean, I wasn't really too in depth with this 5 years ago. This is really my fourth season really doing this in depth. And really, I'd say third season being super in depth, but just because the resources back then were much harder to attain. And
Right.
I mean, at this point, any game is at your fingertips. I mean, if you want to find any game, I could point you in the right direction. It's really not hard. It would take like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
So I think in general, it's really benefited the football community. You're always going to have people that you disagree with, but I don't think disagreement's a bad thing either. I mean, everyone's got an opinion, but as long as they have an informed opinion and they've done the legwork to create that own opinion for themselves, I think that that's a positive. I think the only negative that may have come from this explosion is we see a lot of underclassmen declare for the NFL draft, I think, way too early. We're seeing record numbers every other year entering the NFL draft, and a third of them are not getting drafted. I think that's coming from too much exposure online from unreliable sources. If people can look at a mock draft and construe it any way that they want, even if it's just an opinion-based mock draft, what they don't know, and these families may not know or be taking into consideration, and I use this young man, just as an example, but Peyton Barber
I was just going to bring him up. Yeah.
from Auburn,
Okay.
he's the guy that immediately comes to mind. I mean, that guy's going to be like a late round draft pick at best, and he forego what I think he foregone like 2 years, I think maybe of eligibility, 1 or 2 years of eligibility, and I just think that's a shame because he has a chance as a paid for education, and obviously his family situation may dictate different things, but he may have been reading things online, and I think even in the story he had cited that he had read things from online scouts that had projected him favorably, but it's like, you talk to NFL people and they've got no idea who this guy is. I mean, legitimately, Matt Miller had tweeted, Bleacher Report, he had tweeted, if I hadn't heard of you, it's probably not a good thing that if you entered the NFL draft. He was talking about Barber, but like that wasn't just his opinion. That was literally the scout's opinion too. I mean, I asked Eric Gelko. He's the guy that runs up in scouting. He's well connected throughout the league, and I asked him the same thing. I was like, who is this kid? And he's like, no one I talked to has any idea about him. Like, he was never a guy that they thought would come out. So that leaves him in a really tough situation, and I just think that's a shame. So I guess there is some negative reverberations from the draft thing, but part of that too is just situationally based too. I think that you really need to be talking to the right people, and the internet's not to blame for that. It's just it didn't help in certain situations.
Yeah, and I don't know the specifics of his family or his needs or what his situation is, but to add to that, like I saw a clip that said something like Trey Mason said he's the best running back on that team, and that includes when Trey Mason was there. So I guess that puts Barber at like a freshman or something. But I believe it is 2 years of eligibility has left, and I just started looking at him recently, and you look at the statistics. The stats are nice. You look at some of his tape. He's got good size. I like the way he moves, everything like that. But I said about him, it's almost probably to his detriment because he would have gone viral next year. I mean, this guy would have been like everybody would have been talking about him if he had returned for another season. And here we are. People barely know who he is and are only going to know who he is because, as you mentioned, they're going to be talking about him in a negative light now that he came out too early or whatever the case is. But you bring me to an interesting point. I kind of want to get your take on this. So Maurice Clarett obviously challenged the NFL in the system several years ago, and it really derailed his life, if you will. Who's to say what he could have been as a pro had he just went back for 1 year and abided by the guidelines or the rules that are in place. But do you think that because of all this exposure and what you're saying and just it seems like kids, I mean, just even rookies in general, it used to be a time when a rookie would come in and he would sit for at least a season, if not longer. Quarterbacks were always the ones we really focused on in that regard. And now it seems like guys are coming out and they're contributing right away, and not just contributing, but being all pros, stars, and a lot more than what it used to be. So it seems like kids are getting bigger, faster, stronger at an earlier age. Do you think we're ever going to see a change in the NFL policy that kids can actually come out sooner than what they're able to now?
I don't really think that we're going to see a change with that, and I don't really think that we should. Um, Kids are so specialized training now at a young age. I remember reading a story. This was back in the fall, but this kid had been like specially trained since he was like 12 years old to be like a superstar football player. Like this family was just dump trucking money into him, and I mean he's a physical beast. And I can't remember the kid's name, but you know he looked like a 30-year-old male, just absolute phenom. I mean, it was incredible. I've never seen a specimen. This kid was like 15 or 16 years old.
Like LeBron James in high school?
Yeah, but he was like completely manufactured though. Like LeBron was very natural for his size. I mean, he came from nothing. So, you know, relating that to the NFL, I don't think that they're going to change it. They have it so well currently, where players come into the NFL generally trained, especially technically. Is there work to be done? Absolutely. The spread offenses and defenses kind of make it more difficult as far as projecting to the NFL, but the NFL is starting to adapt to that. They're starting to incorporate more spread scheme wherever they can. Of course, it's a little bit more difficult because the level of athlete is so much better, and the field is technically shrunken because of the hash mark size in the NFL. But you know, I would just be very surprised because they have it so well right now, as opposed to like basketball has like the opposite. Basketball is complete 180. They have it very poorly because their kids are just kind of going to class for 6 months and not really focusing on improving their bodies. But I really think that you need to be 20, 21 years old before entering the NFL. I know since I was 21, which is 3 years ago, I've gained significant mass, and not even just because of working out. That's just kind of a part of maturing as an adult. I mean, you're really not done. You may be done growing height-wise or whatever, but your body changes, the muscle mass changes as you continue to get older. And I think that the NFL knows that. At least I hope that the NFL knows that, because we see so many injuries now. And part of it is just being more proactive in reporting those injuries as opposed to years past. But I would be surprised if they change that, just because like I said, they've got it so well right now with basically almost a free developmental system with college football. So if you're bringing them out earlier, it's just more likely that they're going to bust their bigger projection.
Right. And you know what? I was talking about that recently too, that's just kind of like, that's why I think a guy like Derrick Henry is not going to have as much success in the pros. It's not if he's not gifted, if he's not fast, if he's not athletic, really not to that extent, as much as the guys he's facing now are 3, 4, 5 years more advanced at the next level as far as their speed, their strength. They're legitimately men, and he's playing against, you know, still kids, developing kids at this point. So it's going to be a huge jump. You know, everybody talks about the speed aspect changing to the pros, but the physical strength also changes drastically, you know, at the next level. You also, I made a bad LeBron reference. The funnier one probably would have been Greg Oden in high school, but that, of course, would have been referring to a 40-year-old. So I also wanted to mention, when we were talking about the draft exploding just in terms of coverage and interest and everything like that, I mentioned fantasy, and you are not a fantasy guy by nature, and I appreciate all the times you refer questions over to me through Twitter. So I want to thank you, and please continue doing that. You send them to Matt Harmon and myself, which is a huge compliment to me to be even in that category. So thank you for that. But the explosion of fantasy, DFS, and dynasty leagues, I think has really also contributed to the draft interest, because guys are actually more familiar with college players based on the money they're gambling on Saturdays in DFS and their dynasty leagues, where they're starting to scout guys at a much earlier age because they want to get a jump on who's the next guy next year for my fantasy team, which is just kind of it just shows you the magnitude of what the fantasy game has really become. But moving on a little ahead, I went to the Senior Bowl again this year, my second time. I was sad that you weren't able to make it, but I also noticed that, and this is kind of the segue, with all this increased coverage, they were actually apparently broadcasting the practices live. I don't know if it was on ESPN or NFL Network or whatever it was. So as I'm there watching stuff live, you could see on Twitter people that were home in their living rooms, you know, commenting on the same thing I just saw. Now, I'm asking you, as somebody that watches a lot of film but also gets to see a lot of live action, How big of an advantage do you think it is seeing somebody live as opposed to just watching the film on somebody?
Yeah, quick note on the fantasy thing. I actually won my fantasy league this year, which was shocking. I'm usually really poor in fantasy. I always get the guys that get hurt, and I lost the first game of the season. Ended up sweeping the rest of the year.
Oh, wow.
Ended up winning out. So my receiving core was just loaded.
Congratulations. So I'm going to start sending questions I get your way.
And I'll send them right back. But no, so I'll put it this way. I didn't watch any of the broadcast practices. That's how valuable I thought that they were on TV. Okay. It's just really hard because you're seeing heavily edited things, a very small snapshot. So, I mean, unless if you're really there and when we were there together, I think that you really need to watch one position group a day or one position group for the entire week,
right?
Just to maximize, because otherwise you're getting small snippets. And quite frankly, especially on TV, a 30-minute segment, even if they give you 30 minutes of all one position, it's just not enough because it's not the full day. You can't accurately look at a guy's full performance across the week unless if you're seeing him at different stages against different challenges. So,
yeah.
I love being there in person. If you can scout in person, I think it helps to see what's happening in real life. You feel the moment. I think that counts for something too. I'm a big advocate of especially watching quarterbacks, watching a full game for them. I don't really like watching cut-ups, unfortunately, with time constraints. That's unfortunately what has to happen at times. But if you can watch a full game of a quarterback, you can feel the scope of the moment. You can feel the context in which they're making plays. This same goes for practices. To feel the context of what production is happening and where is extremely important to me. Quite frankly, it's, I think, what a lot of draft writers could improve upon, as opposed to being so highlight or cut-up driven, especially, and cut-ups are great. Again, there's nothing wrong with cut-ups, but at certain positions, you just can't feel the magnitude of the moment. I mean, I refer back to Jared Goff against, I think it was Arizona State, where he was leading the game-winning drive late in the game. There's 40 seconds left on the clock. He scrambles for 10 seconds just to find an open guy and convert the first down, ends up winning the game. I mean, that's something that you don't feel on a cut-up tape because you're still trying to recover from what happened 2 or 3 cut-ups ago or 2 or 3 plays ago that just happened within 10 seconds. Right. So there's not a moment to breathe, to digest what you just saw. Same goes in person. And also with Daniel Jeremiah, not really just trying to pick on Goff, but just coming to the top of my head. Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network scout, he had tweeted that when he saw Goff in person, he had much better velocity, much better zip on his passes than he saw on film. Again, that's something that you don't see unless if you're there in person. You can just see how a player moves, how they interact with teammates, how they interact with coaches. You can hear and see and feel all that in person. So it's a huge advantage, and it's a disadvantage that I think that draft writers online that we face. And so the people like Jeff Risdon of Real GM, he makes an effort to go to games every year in person. And I think that's a huge advantage if you can make those things happen. Same for Kyle Krabs of NDT Scouting.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, you can pick on whoever you want. But I wasn't saying that to throw you under the bus for not being able to go this year. It had nothing to do with that. But and because I know you do get to do live scouting as well. But towards what you were saying, you don't. You get to see what the camera wants you to see, not what your eyes would naturally gravitate towards. And there's so much off camera that happens just in terms of interactions with other players, with the coaches, footwork. Sometimes based on the camera angle, you don't get to see a lot of the footwork, things of that nature. So there really is a much broader picture. I mean, to anybody watching that's trying to visualize this or an analogy, is kind of like if you think you see something, it's the perfect picture. And when you go to take it, it just doesn't add up. The picture does not even come close to what you're visualizing firsthand. So it's the same thing with with seeing guys live. But I wanted to shift focus a little bit and stay with the scouting stuff, but take advantage of you being my guest today and being that cornerback guru. So it is specifically cornerbacks. And the reason I'm asking that is because there are some guys that come over from safety to corner or are labeled defensive backs. So I know you're familiar with the whole scope of things, but I was kind of taken back and doing some research just to kind of get a positional feel for how positions break down over the last 10 years. And it was something on average like 50 cornerbacks or 50 defensive backs go every year in the draft, something like that on average, which just goes to show you that that's one of the most drafted positions on the field. So it says to me that it's a revolving door, that it's just such a hard position to lock down, that every year they're just taking as many chances as they can to try to fill a need. So what are some of the things that you look for when you're looking at a defensive back, and what are some of the things that separate things for you? Obviously, people talk about size and length, you know, and able to match up with some of these taller receivers that are coming out now, but that doesn't always prove to make a good cornerback. So what are some things that you're looking for?
Yeah, definitely. I think that size is definitely an interesting thing because I don't think you want to go too far in either direction. I don't think that you should really eliminate players just based off of size, but in the same scope, you don't really want to look for exceptions. There are certain few guys, Tyrann Mathieu, Brent Grimes, Brandon Flowers, guys that were smaller, but those guys are also elite athletes, and they were elite athletes coming out of school. So if you're looking at small cornerbacks, one tip that I have would be, unless if they have a dominant trait that can help overcome their size, and less so about physicality and more so about looking at foot speed, you're looking at their efficiency with their footwork. Are they wasting steps? Are they basically taking false steps at any point in the route, or are they polished, able to stay in the hip of the receiver throughout a variety of routes? Because if they're not effective in coverage, they're not going to have a trump card. You have to have some sort of trump card if you've got a size disadvantage. So I do look at size, at least in terms of, okay, does he compensate for his size in some way? I don't think bigger is better. If you're 6'2" or 6'3", it's great, but you're also more likely to be stiff, and you're more likely to really be exposed to a smaller variety of plays, especially in college, because those guys get away with a lot more of just coasting on athletic ability than what you'll see in the NFL. I mean, at the NFL, you've got to be a technician, and if you're not a technician, you will get beat. So you have to find guys who are mix that technician aspect. It shows work ethic. It shows really upside as well. But also there has to be a baseline level of athletic ability too. So within athletic ability, I definitely want to see a few things. And it depends on the scheme that you're coming out of. It depends on the scheme that you're going to go into as well. The feet are very important to me. I'm not Rex Ryan, but I do love footwork. And I think it's very important to look at the foot of a player and say, okay, well, how well does he move? How quickly does he move? How quickly can they change directions? And most of that starts with the feet. You can compensate for stiff hips if you have quick feet. You can compensate for stiff hips if you are highly intelligent and if you do your homework beforehand. If you know the receiver, what their tendencies are entering the game, and if you study enough film, you're going to be able to beat that receiver mostly with mentally, and then you just have to make it happen physically on the field. So I think that, and that's really difficult to judge because especially without the use of all 22 angles in college, it's very difficult to tell that. But in the NFL, you can see that a lot easier. You can watch, just a couple games of a cornerback and have a really good feeling for the work that they put in, especially preparing for that specific receiver that they may be facing. Because receivers are going to run generally about 4 or 5 routes that are going to be like their go-to move. So if you're seeing a cornerback who can consistently stay with them in the hip pocket throughout the course of those routes, what you're saying is, well, it's probably a good athlete overall. It's someone that can change directions well, and also react to sudden movements, which is going to be like certain plants with their foot when the receiver plants their foot in the ground, makes a sharp cut. So, and then it's also going to be mentally, did they do their homework? So that's really the number one thing that I'm going to look for, is how well do they cut in short spaces, how clean they are with their movements. Someone that's not balanced or someone that's overly stiff may fall over themselves consistently, and that's something that you'll definitely see with bigger cornerbacks more so than smaller guys. But it's why teams tend to miss on the more of those big guys. Stanley Jean-Baptiste was a guy I absolutely did not like coming out of college because he would fall over himself, and he was really limited to one scheme. So you want to find guys who can play a couple of different schemes because no team runs one single scheme. So what were they exposed to in college? I think that's important. And then also ball skills. I think ball skills are probably the hardest thing to find in a college football player. It's very difficult to find guys who find the ball. One, locate the ball. Locate the ball while it's in the air. Two, they locate the ball without losing track of their man. They need to stay within an arm length of their man while they're playing the ball. Three, do they have the my ball mentality? If they want the ball more than the receiver, they have every right to it. And sometimes you'll hear during football broadcasts people saying, well, he didn't look back for the ball and that was the right play. Yeah, it's not defensive pass interference because you didn't look back for the ball. However, if you don't look back for the ball, there's a greater chance that you're going to make a mistake or that you're going to misplay the wide receiver. Looking back for the ball not only gives you a chance to play for the ball, but it gives you the opportunity to correctly play the receiver who is going to be playing the ball. So you have to have an idea of where the ball is at all times, whether you're looking at it or you looked at it earlier. You just need to know where you are on the field, and that kind of shows me a couple things. It shows me, one, discipline. Are you disciplined enough and are you confident enough in your coverage ability to look back for the ball and continue running with your man? What you'll see a lot of times is receivers or cornerbacks panicking at the first sign of a receiver jumping for the ball. They'll put their arms up and they'll shove the receiver, instantly drawing pass interference. And quarterbacks love picking on that. They see that. They see a cornerback who will do that. They're just going to target them pass after pass after pass. And they're never going to learn their lesson. So finding guys with ball skills, whether or not they can complete at the catch point, it's great if you can. If a cornerback can catch the ball, great. It shouldn't be a requirement. The requirement should be finding the ball, providing good coverage, and deterring the quarterback from constantly targeting that side of the field. Because if you've got a cornerback who can consistently deter that quarterback, whether it be through the threat of his ball skills and making a play on the ball, or just overly tight coverage, those two things can really work in a defense's favor. And really, Richard Sherman is a great example of this. Richard Sherman constantly locks down 1/3 of the field. Now, he's the ultimate playmaker on the ball. Some guys don't have to be that good of a playmaker to still deter getting those targets. However, the more of a playmaker you are, the more of a weapon. So it's a fine line. Some guys like Joe Hayden are a little bit more high variance. He's not a very good cover cornerback, but he's a big-time playmaker. So there's a little bit of give and take. Joe Hayden doesn't have that technique. He's got the physical talent, though. And so that's why he's the playmaker, because when he does it right, he is as good as anybody. When he gets it wrong, he's often caught badly out of position. So what I look for, again, footwork. I want to see how smoothly they can cut and how efficient they are with their feet. Are they wasting steps at the top of the route or not? That also shows me mental aptitude. And then 3, I also want to see the ball skills. Are they consistently finding the ball? If you can find a guy who can do those 3 things, I would be shocked if that's not a good player in the NFL.
Well, and I was going to ask you, is the position still evolving? Because there have been a bunch of rule changes geared towards making the game more of a passing league, and in some regards, the cornerback is almost like an endangered species because that position seems to be the one picked on the most with these with the rule changes and trying to make the game again more of a passing league. So has there been enough time with these changes for the position to really kind of say, okay, now we know what we're dealing with, or is the position still kind of developing and changing? Is that making any sense? And how I'm phrasing the question?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is changing because you need to have guys who are more adapt to multiple schemes. I think that's going to be the biggest things with teams throwing the ball 60% of the time. You've got to throw in variations of coverage to keep the quarterbacks guessing, and it's very difficult to do that. Back 20 years ago, when they're running the ball 55% of the time, you can get away with man coverage much easier because, one, the level of athlete at wide receiver has drastically improved. The guys coming out of college now are just freaks. I mean, you've got guys like Martavis Bryant
Yeah.
Just as one example of many examples. There's just not guys playing cornerback that are that good of athletes. And it's just for whatever reason, those guys are migrating to positions that get the ball more frequently. And maybe it's just because it's easier to be a great player with the ball in your hands than it is at cornerback where you're trying to stop those guys. So they're at a physical disadvantage for a lot of these cornerbacks. So they've got to be able to adjust to different schemes. They've got to be able to, I think, overcome a difficult spot out of college, because in college, a lot of these guys just are not exposed to high technique situations. Spread defenses and spread offenses, they're quick hitting. So a lot of these guys are playing off ball coverage. And by off ball coverage, I mean lining up over 5 or 6 yards off of the receiver. And this leaves in a situation where the receiver's not really running a route. They're just either going deep or they're going to be running an underneath route that really doesn't require precision. And so it puts the cornerback in a position where they've just got to react. And there's not really a chance for them to be overly exposed to more technical routes, more situations where they're going to have to read a receiver at the top of his route and actually see what he's running and react to what he's running. So it absolutely changes how we evaluate cornerbacks, because it's more projection based than ever before, because it's based off of what they saw in college. And with college teams going so fast, you're not seeing many special plays called in between. You're seeing more of, okay, we're going to play this bland generic defense just to make sure that we're all on the same page and keep us from getting killed on this play by trying to be overly cute. So, it's very difficult, especially without the use of coaches tape and all 22 to try to evaluate from a TV broadcast angle. It's very difficult. So it's kind of funny, because whenever I see hot takes based off these cornerbacks where we see just TV angles, it's like we don't know what happened in half of that route. Right. All we saw was as soon as the ball was snapped and then when the receiver was actually targeted. But there's so much more there that we don't see.
Right. Well, listen, I could talk all day with you, especially about the cornerbacks and the position and the history of it. I was starting to run out of time a little, so I want to get a couple more questions in. Going to go a little rapid fire. So I'll give you a couple questions. Try to get them as quick as you can. What would you say is your biggest hit so far since you've been doing this? Somebody that was your guy that actually you called correctly. Is there one guy that sticks out?
I'd probably say Aaron Donald or
Okay.
Khalil Mack. I mean, I was super adamant that those guys were elite players. I had them both as top 5 players in the class. I'd probably say Donald, just because Donald had a lot of doubt around him, at least from big media. I love that guy. I had him, I think, number 4 overall in that draft class.
Okay. And then on the other end, who was somebody who convinced was going to be a quality player that's turned out to be a bust to this point?
Same draft class. I'll go with Devontae Adams.
Okay.
I thought he was just going to be a physical freak at wide receiver. He just doesn't even look like the same athlete right now. I don't know if it's whether due to injuries or what, but he's really struggled with confidence and athleticism.
Yeah, I agree with you on what he's been. I wasn't sold on him coming out, to be perfectly honest, but I was sold on his passer, who's now become one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, and I hope that continues. This dude is. Did you see the pass he threw in the Pro Bowl?
That's a hot take, my friend.
Oh man, did you see the pass he threw in the Pro Bowl? That was like 50+ yards in the air.
It's a hot take, man. Saying he's elite already, that's a hot take.
All right, well,
I like it though. I like it.
He's making me look good. All right. So another thing was, I know you watch a lot of film, but do you actually get to see any movies that don't involve football players? And any you'd recommend, or any you've seen recently? And it could be a football movie, if it were. Just, I mean, more of a theatrical sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So my girlfriend, she's huge into movies. She's as into movies as I am into football. So whenever we do take a little bit of a break, we're usually watching movies. So we're big movie watchers. Just saw Deadpool 2 days ago. Deadpool was fantastic. Yeah, quite honestly, it was one of my favorite superhero movies. And I'm not really a big fan of the superhero movies. I love the Batman series, and I love the Iron Man series. Outside of that, I'm not really a big fan of them, because generally I just think they're too kid friendly. Yeah. Deadpool is not kid friendly, so I loved it.
And I think that was like his whole intent with that was
Yeah.
to make more of like an adult superhero movie, kind of poking fun at, you know, this rage of, you know, I remember recently going to see something, I forgot what it was, but they were like, you know, they play like 8 trailers or whatever before the movie starts, and it was like 6 out of 8 trailers were all Marvel movies coming out in, you know, the next 6 months. It was insane. It was like everything was Marvel or DC now is coming in, but so Deadpool, I don't want to ask you any more about it because I haven't seen it yet, and it is on my list. But it comes recommended.
Absolutely, absolutely. I loved it.
Okay. And another thing before we kind of wrap this up is I've tried to lure giveaways from my guests for members of the audience. I still have yet to start handing out these prizes, but I have a nice pile accumulating. So is there anything, whether it be from Bleacher Report, from any of the sites or your outlets, it could be from your daytime job. I mean, it could be a position with the Department of Homeland as a, you know, recruiting somebody. Is there anything that you could think of off the top of your head that you would be willing to partake with?
You know, unfortunately, Bleacher Report doesn't give swag. So as messed up as that is, I'll dig around. I'll see if I have anything, but I actually haven't gotten anything as part of any organization I've been a part of through football. So I'm not too sure if I have anything, but I'll dig around and I'll see if I can find anything.
Yeah, we'll figure something out because it will be a collector's item then, even more so because it will be a one of one from the Wharton from the Wharton warehouse. But dude, I really want to thank you for making the time to do this. Again, I know we've talked about doing this for a while now, and you're busy, I'm busy, and it's just been great to be able to get to have this. And this is, you know, this is the heart of your year. This is draft season, so it's I know you're very busy. So for you to take the time means a lot to me. We have some history together. We go back a little. We kind of gamed the game, if you will. That's an inside thing between you and I. I don't want to get us in too much trouble, but I hope to see you again in the near future. Now that you're on the East Coast, maybe we can make that happen. But please tell everybody everywhere they can find you. I will have your information put up on the screen, so it will be there in text. But please, in your words, let everybody know where they can find you again.
Yeah, best place to find me is on Twitter at NFL Film Study. Also at BleacherReport.com. Like I said, I'm publishing 6 articles a week. So, I mean, if you check out my Twitter feed, you'll find latest articles. Right. And also draftcentric.weebly.com. I occasionally update some things on there, but I do have my draft rankings up on there.
Okay. And he's saying he's writing 6 articles a week. If that might sound to the average person like they're little blurbs or they're short little paragraphs or posts. No, these are like full-fledged articles that are like, I mean, minimum. You're writing a novel on a weekly basis.
Yeah, minimum of like at least like 1,100 words, 1,200 words a night. So some of them are much longer too. So
these are comprehensive, well-written pieces that everybody should be checking out. And he's a cornerback specialist. Excuse me, but he's not limited in his knowledge from any position. He covers all 22. This is Ian Wharton. I appreciate your time, buddy. Thank you so much for being on, and look forward to more great things from you coming out in the future.
Appreciate it, my man. It's my pleasure.
No problem. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you next time.